The question hung in the air, suspended between the whirl of cicadas and the lonely coo of a mourning dove. I hugged my arms to my chest as if I needed to hold myself up. Despite the heat, I felt a chill run through me. "I'll think about it," the colonel said, and he disappeared into the kitchen. That night I spread out TJ's Vietnam photographs on my bed. The soldier in the wheelchair, the bandaged stump of what had been his right leg pointing straight at the camera, a terrified child naked to the waist, hands to his ears running down the road, a helicopter hovering in the distance. The soldier on the stretcher, the wound soaking his bandaged chest. A hollowed-eyed GI staring at the camera, the skin burned and scarred across his cheeks and forehead. I left them all on the colonel's desk, fanned out like a hand of cards, where he would find them in the morning when he sat down to drink his coffee. Chapter 14. School started the Tuesday after Labor Day. If I'd had any big dreams about the 8th grade being some kind of promised land, they fell flat pretty quick. 8th grade was just like 7th grade, but even more so. Math was good, English boring, and in history we were studying the Greeks and Romans, just like we had in 7th grade and 6th grade too. The one bright spot of my day was the newspaper, 6th period, Miss Ronco's room, 2nd floor. Originally my elective had been music appreciation, but I'd met a new girl in 1st period pre-algebra class, Alice Freeman, who complained that she couldn't be a staff photographer for the paper because she didn't know how to develop film. "Why don't you learn?" I asked her. "I could teach you." "I'm allergic to the chemicals," Alice told me. "At least I assume I am. I'm allergic to almost everything else. Anyway, my mom won't let me get near a darkroom just in case." So we hatched a plan. She could take pictures, I would develop them, and wonder of wonders, Miss Ronco liked our plan just fine. The only catch was I'd have to write articles for the paper too. "I can't write," I told Miss Ronco. "Just ask every English teacher I've ever had." "It takes practice, like everything else," Miss Ronco insisted. "Besides, the beauty of the newspaper writing is that there's a formula to it. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine." Well, rules I could do. So I wrote my first article, which was about a new teacher who had been teaching in India for the last 3 years. And it turned out okay. Alice took the pictures, and they turned out even better. "Look at this. It's got my byline," I told Private Hollister, slapping down the paper on his desk. He was still at the rec center, still waiting to hear if he'd been shipped to Vietnam. But so far, nobody in his unit had gone as far as the Dairy Queen in Hacker Heights. The new guy from Fort Sill had yet to arrive to take over the rec center, so Private Hollister stayed put, mopping up and reading comic books. "I didn't know you were a writer," he said after he'd finished the article. "This is real good." "I'm not a writer," I insisted. "I couldn't write my way out of a paper bag. But newspaper reporting is different. You just put down the who, the when, the how, the where, and the why, and you've got it licked. There's nothing fancy to it." "It's still real good." Private Hollister pulled a deck of cards out from his top drawer and waved them at me. "What do you say?" "I don't know. I'd hate for you to get ahead of me." Private Hollister pulled out a pad of paper out of the drawer. "Look, a whole new record-keeping device. The notebook's retired. Nothing can ever change about how things ended this summer." One game, August 29th, 1969, the Friday before Labor Day. We had started playing the minute I walked in, and we kept playing until 5 p.m., taking a 15-minute break for lunch. The day began with Private Hollister 2 games ahead of me, but by mid-afternoon we traded the lead with every hand. "You got 'em right where you want 'em now. Show 'em where the door is," Colonel Byrd cheered through the pool table, where he was going through a stack of papers. He held one up to examine it more closely, and I realized he was looking at a photograph. "Is that one of yours?" I asked him. Ever since he started helping me in the darkroom, I'd wanted to see some of Sergeant Bird's photographs, but he never printed any. He only developed the film. I put down my cards and walked over to where he was. "Can I see one?" "Nothing to see, really," Sergeant Bird said, but he handed me the picture all the same. It was of a soldier sitting in front of a hooch, clearly somewhere in Vietnam. "I shot 300 rolls of film over there," Sergeant Bird explained, "and now it's all developed. So I thought I'd try printing some." "This one came out good," I told him, admiring how the print's graininess gave it a sort of moody feel. "Yeah, it's okay, but I don't know how many more I can do." "How come?" He let out a deep breath. "Too many memories. I look at all my negatives and I ask myself, why do I want to remember that?" "Maybe you don't have a choice." "Exactly, my dear Watson. That's the very conclusion I've drawn myself. I'm between the proverbial rock and a hard place, memory-wise." "You're giving up on the game, Jamie?" Private Hollister called. "Because I'm still ahead, and that's fine by me." I sat back down, and by 4:45 we were racing through the final hands. The person who reached 100 points won the game, the set, the match, the whole enchilada. My last hand was a beauty. I was dealt 2 pairs off the bat and ran 3 of spades, the 3, the 4, and the 5, and every time I picked up something I could use, discarded what I didn't need. But when I looked up at Private Hollister, I could tell the same was happening for him. Should I go ahead and knock? If I waited too long, he might get that last card he needed, might rid himself of all that deadwood and get gin. I knocked. It was close, very close. I spread out my cards on the desk. I had 1 unmatched card. Private Hollister laid out his card. 3 pairs, the Jack and Queen of Hearts, and 2 pieces of deadwood, cards that didn't match anything. I'd won by a card on the last day of summer. "Man, oh man," Private Hollister said, shaking his head. "You whooped me." He wrote the points down in the notebook, and then at the very bottom of all of our scores, he signed his name and handed the notebook to me to do the same. "You keep it," he said, when I tried to hand it back to him. "Just so you remember all the good times we had playing. That's about the most fun I've ever had, playing cards. It ain't fun unless you're playing with someone who knows what they're doing." I could have cried, but I didn't. But I could have. Now I eyed the deck of cards, wondering if it would spoil things to ever play Jim Rummy with Private Hollister again. Maybe I should leave the memory of an amazing victory in pristine condition, unmuddied by any later losses. Oh, what the heck. I took a seat across from Private Hollister. "Deal 'em," I ordered. For a while I checked in at the rec center 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes hanging around to play cards, other times just stopping in to wave and then heading to somewhere else. School was running me ragged. Miss Rongo kept assigning me newspaper articles, and it seemed like I was doing everyone's darkroom work for them. Alice Freeman said she bet our newspaper would win some sort of prize for photography. I did such a great job of making the pictures look good. At first, every time I stopped by the rec center, my heart beat a couple of beats faster right before I walked in. Would Private Hollister still be there? The colonel had never given me a direct yes or no about helping him, and I knew I shouldn't ask. It went against protocol to ask about a soldier's orders. I had done it once, and I couldn't do it again. But after a few weeks, I relaxed. It seemed clear that Private Hollister wasn't going anywhere. I relaxed so much, sometimes I went for a week without checking on him. Alice had started teaching me to take pictures using her camera. She thought it was crazy that I knew so much about developing and printing film and not a thing in the world about photography, which she informed me was the art of writing with light. We'd stay after school and take pictures of the football team, the lockers, the janitorial staff, all kinds of different stuff, just to see how interesting we could make it look. One afternoon when I got home from school, there was a roll of film from TJ waiting for me. "Any letter?" I asked my mom, who was writing out a grocery list on the kitchen table. "I don't know if he wrote you one. He sent a short one to Daddy and me. Not much news. He says he wants to learn to fly a helicopter." Of course, there was no letter in the envelope he sent me, just the film. I decided to go ahead and develop it that afternoon, and if I didn't have time to print it, I could take the negatives to the school with me the next day and work in the darkroom there. "Don't even ask me to play cards," I called out as I walked into the rec center. "I don't have time. I've got a roll of film to develop and a history test to study for. It's all about Greek columns, if you can believe that. Like anybody needs to know that stuff." "I'm sorry, I'm not sure I follow you." The soldier sitting at Private Hollister's desk was not Private Hollister. He didn't bear the least resemblance to Private Hollister. He was heavy-set and bifocals, and had a 5 o'clock shadow. I wasn't sure if Private Hollister actually even shaved more than once a week. "Where's Private Hollister?" I asked, realizing it had been over a week since I'd seen him, maybe 2. "He's supposed to be working here." "Reassigned. I'm Private Grenier. Is there something I can help you with?" "Reassigned where?" "First signal. Here at Fort Hood?" "Not sure. He might have been one of the units that shipped out to the 3rd Corps Tactical Zone last week." "Vietnam?" "Saigon or thereabouts. Place called the Parrots Beat. Buddy of mine at Fort Sill was there. Said it was pretty grim." Panic rocked me like a hurricane wind. I'd stopped paying attention, and now Private Hollister was gone. I ran from the rec center and looked around wildly, as though maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still time to find him, but there was nothing to see. Just blank faces of buildings that lined Battalion Avenue. Typical Army architecture. Nothing there to give you a plan for what to do next. Nothing to give you one single answer. There was only one place I could go for answers, and that was the Chief of Staff's office. If I wanted to know what happened to Private Hollister, I'd have to ask the Colonel. Chapter 15. "He can't see you right now, honey. He's on an important call." Miss Merline, the Colonel's secretary, smiled at me and held out a plate of cookies. "Mama made these last night, special for Colonel Dexter. She thinks the world of him. Take one, honey. They're snickerdoodles." I took a cookie and munched on it without actually tasting it. How could I have let Private Hollister get away from me? I counted back the days since I'd seen him last. 10 days. Anything could have happened to him in that amount of time. He could have been shipped out to Vietnam, killed, and returned to the States in a body bag in 10 days. Easy. "You want to sit down, sweetheart?" Miss Merline pointed to a row of hardback chairs lined up against the wall outside of the Colonel's office. "I don't know what his phone call's about, so I can't tell you how long he's going to be." I sat down on the middle chair, taking another cookie from Miss Merline. I immediately started fidgeting. "Are you sure you can't interrupt him?" Miss Merline shook her head sadly. "Oh, no, honey. You know how your daddy is. That's the #1 rule around here. No interrupting Colonel Dexter when he's on the phone."